Hello, can you see me and hear
Yes.
me?
Hello, Ramin.
Hey, good evening. How are
Yes.
you, Shindo? It's so good to see you again.
Good. Good to see you again. Yes. Let me try to
Thank you so
adjust the
much for
thing.
taking out time again for our conversation. How,
No worries. Yeah. Yeah.
how are you doing
I
today?
think I'm good. We are not that busy, but still preparing for some of the overseas visit interview possible. There are some events upcoming, like the one in Singapore for this what do you call it Shangri-La dialogue, and
I see.
also in Moscow this 80th anniversary of the war against Nazism.
Mm-hmm.
President Xi reported it to be there, so we will go there to cover the event. So yeah.
Okay. So I would just like to build up upon everything that we talked about yesterday. So I'll
Hmm.
just dive deep into the questions because I don't want to take a lot of your time today, and we only have
Right.
around 35 minutes. So I don't want to prolong it too much. Um,
Yeah.
so yesterday we talked about a lot about the protectionist policies and the tariff policies and everything. So, what do you think? What other tools does the Trump administration has that you think it can use it to counter China's global economic influence around this year and in the upcoming years?
I think, yes, they have probably other tools. Sometimes it's uh, hard to understand, I would say, beyond people's comprehension. For example, the latest uh, hearing of U.S. Consumers, U.S. Exporters, in terms of finding the ships made in China or owned by China, or you have a fleet, there's a ship made in China, you will up to the fine of 50 million US dollars. That's a lot of money. And so there's kind of emergency situation. So this practice of, it's like a gangster-like, and this is not based on whatever rules
Yeah.
under WTO.
Yeah.
There are some rules you can resort to protect your interests, but this is not about protecting your interests. And also, this kind of practice, or this kind of methods is beyond expectation for a lot of people. It's a surprise. I would say it's in an active way,
Hmm.
because they are breaking, like they are lowering the threshold. What is the bottom line of uh, having a trade disputes with your partner, or what you can do to in the name of protecting your interests.
Hmm.
Yes, US has a very small percentage in terms of shipbuilding globally, 1% or less than 1%.
Hmm.
China, more than 40%.
Yeah.
If you add to this number the orders, from China for those fleets, it's about 90%. So yes, China is in a dominant position along with Japan, South Korea.
Hmm.
That's it. If the US want to compete with China, do it in a fair way.
Yes.
But, obviously, fines for any ships that dock the US port. This is not the justifiable way of doing things, of,
And also,
of
I also
distributing.
think that because of this antagonistic nature of retaliation, the global supply chains get disrupted, which takes years to then recover.
Yes, I would say this. We are seeing a fragmented globalization, to say the least, and it causes this kind of chaos and uncertainty, and all the global shipping companies, the big companies, they you have to prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
Somehow you are doing extra work for less profit.
Yeah.
This is a damage of business for everybody, including that of the US, including
Yeah.
US exporters. Because
Yeah.
if you want to export your stuff to another country, you have to rely on those ships. The ships probably, most likely, not made in the US.
Yeah.
And so, beyond that, I would also add the US, they could do something also, probably in a threatening way, because they are controlling the shipping lines. For
Yes.
example, the
The
Red
trade routes,
Sea or
yeah, the
their
shipping
shipping
routes.
routes,
Yeah,
their shipping route, if they are, I don't know, like, how far they will go. If they are in a kind of a desperate situation, say, oh, we are not able to compete with the Chinese,
yeah,
let's do something dramatic. Let's stop
yeah.
the, importing, exporting stuff to China.
Mm,
So we somehow, as said by the previous Biden administration official, like we slow down the Chinese growth, slow down the Chinese innovation.
yeah,
Competition is fine. We have to do it in a healthy way, in a
mm,
positive way,
yeah,
ideally, that everybody can benefit from that. I think most of the countries in the world are looking at China and the US to do or to compete in a positive way.
yeah,
So not only the two countries can grow, side by side, but also the rest of the world will also benefit from the engagement between or
yeah,
the competition between Washington.
yeah.
But this is so far not the case, unfortunately.
I believe there are a lot of areas of negotiation and complementarity also. If we play along the rules of collaboration and not hardcore retaliation. There are a lot of areas where US can complement China and China can complement US, and it can be a good bonhomie for global trade.
Absolutely. For example, the U.S. side complains about this, trade deficit. The Chinese side usually response is like, okay, we want to buy your advanced chips, but you don't sell it to us,
Yeah,
right? We
yeah.
want to what about your, advanced weapons? We can
Hmm.
purchase some of the U.S. military weapons, but
Yeah,
you do not send it to China, right?
yeah.
You see China as a rival or, even potential enemy.
Hmm.
We don't do business in this area, in that area.
Hmm.
They impose a lot of restrictions on their own companies from doing business with China.
The China, yeah.
So that's not really wise in the sense that for example, this chip industry, China represents 20% of
Hmm.
the income of some of their big companies
Hmm.
in chip industry. If they lost the Chinese market, and then their profits, their income, revenue will be reduced,
Yeah.
and then their R&D will be reduced, and
Yes.
then their position or their leading position will be that dwindled, will be also reduced. So long term, that's not really good to their own companies. So I think if we, the Chinese could purchase a lot more stuff than the agricultural products.
Hmm.
China could buy oil and gas from the U.S.
Yeah.
Well, they would like to probably to sell to the Chinese side. China could buy the chips. China could buy a lot of stuff, technologies from the U.S. side, and then there's no need for China to invest and research on their own. So
Hmm.
both sides benefit from this kind of partnership.
Yeah.
This is a truly a win-win partnership, but
Yeah.
somehow, some obviously people in power have a different thinking, and
Hmm.
that's not really the smartest way of doing business right now.
So previously, you also mentioned about China's economic strategy in terms of strengthening its alliances with the Asian partners as well as in BRICS. So, what are some of the key objectives or priorities of China moving forward in 25 as well as beyond 25? So, do we see a push towards self-sufficiency or do we see a deeper global integration?
I would say both. On one hand, what China is doing, as I said, to spur domestic consumption.
Yeah.
So the Chinese growth would depend more on domestic demand, rather than, say, the market from the US.
Mm.
And at the same time, China is investing heavily in innovation. Let's say artificial intelligence, big data, quantum computing,
Mm.
uh, space exploration. So we are seeing DeepSeek and other people call it like six dragons, right? Little
Yeah.
dragons,
Yeah.
based in Hangzhou in one city. In terms of human body like robotic
Hmm.
development. And
Hmm.
also, if you look at the installation of robots,
Yeah.
China is the number one in the
Yes.
factories.
China is
So China
leading
is
that
developing
industry.
rapidly,
Yeah.
leading in that industry. Even in AI, one scientist said that probably the distance or the lap between China
Mhm.
and the US in terms of artificial intelligence now has been shrank to 3 months rather
Mm.
than 2 years or 10 years. No, it's
Mm.
3 months behind the US. So there's a fierce competition inside of the Chinese. There's a Chinese market heavy investment, from the government, from the private sector. So yes, they are making progress, and based on their own research and study, without assistance from the US, without the US technology, China proves it can do it. And this is so what do we call like high quality productive force, so
Yeah.
called high quality development in China. So consumption, high quality development,
Yeah.
this will be the two, let's say, engines of Chinese growth. And
Yeah.
on the other side, externally, China is looking at expanding at least regional organization, regional integration. For
Yeah.
example, RCEP with the ASEAN countries, Japan,
Mm.
South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. But also, China is applying to join the CPTPP led by Japan,
Mm.
across the Pacific countries. And also, China is applying to join this digital partnership led by Singapore
Yeah.
and I think Chile. So digital trade, digital technology. So China is basically, you can see the signal is very clear. They want to be part
Yes.
of this group.
Mm.
And of course, China will follow the rules. China will discuss issues with these partners. China has also reached this comprehensive investment
Yeah.
agreement with the European Union,
Yeah.
in which China has made a lot of concessions. Few
Yeah.
people know that China has made huge concessions to the European side, but
Mm.
unfortunately, because of the pressure from Washington, they shelved that agreement to their own benefit, to their
Yeah.
own damage, I would say. And also China is trying to do as much as possible to push forward globalization.
Yes.
People say, "Oh, there's a Chinese version of globalization with Belt and Road Initiative, which
Yes.
stresses very much about connectivity. Like physical connectivity with the
Exactly.
port, roads, highways,
Yeah.
uh, you know, railways, and also with connectivity in terms of people-to-people exchange.
Yeah.
And also I would say like financial policies, economic policies.
Yeah.
Let's coordinate with each other so we
Yeah.
can grow together.
Yes.
We can all benefit from this partnership. For example, clean energy. China announced actually 2 years ago, I believe, that there's no more fire plants based on coal
Mm.
in terms of BRI projects. So
Yeah.
it will all be clean, based on clean energy,
Yeah.
solar panels, wind energy, etc. So I think China is a force of is a positive force in terms of fighting climate change, in terms of developing the economy and the society of those mostly, let's say, global South countries.
Yeah.
And also, China is eager to contribute it and to share its success. Story of success is development.
Mm.
Is to share its experience as long as you think it's valuable. We can work together. Otherwise, China will not impose any kind of model or any
Mm.
kind of a lesson or experience on
Yeah.
other countries. That
Yeah.
is not the Chinese way of doing things, because China stresses very much, every country is different. Every country has their
Yes.
own national
Yes. There's no
conditions. They have
one
to find
size
out.
fits all that you can just impose
No,
on all the countries. It just does not work that way.
no, also, China does not attach political strings to their either assistance, aid, or investment, because China believes, countries it's up to the people and up to the national
Yeah.
government
Yeah.
to figure out a way that's proper for their own development.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You cannot pretend that you cannot do it in a way that, oh, I know better about your country than you are,
Yeah.
than you do. You have to follow me. I can
Yeah.
dictate, the path of your national development. That's too
Yeah.
arrogant and
Yeah.
often wrong. Yeah.
Yes. So you just mentioned European Union, and we talked about European Union before also. So we see that they're stuck in a sort of a quandary or a dilemma where they are reliant with China and on China with their economic ties, but then their political alignment is with the US. So how do you think Brussels will, or EU as in general as a whole, will navigate this balancing act?
It's a good question. My personal opinion is like I think the EU and individual EU member countries uh, probably it will be good for them to have a reality check in terms of relationship with Washington and also relationship with China.
Yeah.
I know for some countries, for some political scientists, even I talk to, they still have this. I call them fantasy, not realistic,
Hmm.
idea of like, okay, Trump is a temporary, and then there will be a democratic government
Yeah.
that will, U.S. policy on European Union will change,
Yeah.
and the situation we will go back to the normal. I don't think so. I think what Trump does to the European countries, represented to a large degree
Hmm.
that's American people want to do.
Yeah.
He's, I mean, like it or not, he's very popular
Hmm.
among the American public there.
Yeah.
So I think it's the time, it's a tipping point for the European Union to have a reality check
Yes.
about, say, strategic autonomy,
Yes.
defense, economy, technology, etc. I know they have talked about de-risking from the Chinese side. Despite
Yeah.
there's little
Yeah.
risk from the Chinese side, I strongly disagree with that kind of practice because I do see strong interdependence between the two sides rather than risks.
Yeah.
We don't feel any risk by relying on the European technology
Yeah.
or by purchasing European made cars,
Hmm.
automobiles or technologies. We don't see any kind of national threat or
Yeah.
danger there. But somehow the old Chinese technology somehow it's politicized. There's a political uh, as, uh, aspect to everything is being politicized. Politicized. Unfortunately, that's not the right way to go. I
Hmm.
think we should, fall back a little bit
Yes.
and take a closer look at the relationship between China and the European Union.
Hmm.
Politically, we are different in terms of a system, in terms of
Yes.
a traditional culture, but
Yeah.
that's okay. I think the success of the Chinese side shows its system works. You
Yes.
like it or not, you may say, "Oh, there are a lot of problems with the Chinese system." Yes, there are problems. As a Chinese, I would say so.
Hmm.
Chinese people probably say so because,
Yeah.
but at the same time, we understand there's no perfect system.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what about the European political system? It's not really functioning
Yeah.
well, at least. The US political system, now you have Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I believe a lot of people are not happy with that, right?
Yeah.
But it's really, at the end of the day, is whether the people accept it or not, whether the people like it or not.
Yeah.
If you take a look at the approval rate of the Chinese government, for example, done by a US company, I think
Hmm.
it's, what's its name, like Edelman, every
Yeah.
year approval rate the Chinese government enjoys the highest approval rate among the world. It's not done by the Chinese government, the survey. The survey is done by an American company.
Hmm.
So that says something about the Chinese system. And also what China has done, Chinese policies are in Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, or Taiwan. It's very complicated issues. A lot of people, I'm afraid, they don't uh, fully understand the whole picture
Yeah.
or the history
Yeah.
behind the issue. So often, they politicize it. They
Yeah.
simplify this issue into black and white.
Yeah.
Whatever the Chinese side does is bad,
Hmm.
and somehow their ideas are always right, positive. No, it's not the case. And I think people should be patient and be probably more realistic and listen to the Chinese side. What you are doing. Let's exchange ideas, and then we think this is the right way, or that's the wrong way. If you are concerned with that, okay, you can
Yeah.
talk to the Chinese side and in a very
Yeah.
respectful way. And I think there would be a better understanding of the
Absolutely.
issue. But I think still we should focus on, a win-win engagement.
Yes.
Um, you know,
To move
by
from the
engaging with
from
the
the
Chinese
zero
side.
sum game that they've made this towards a win-win situation. Yeah. That should be the goal.
Exactly. China would very much love to engage with the European side. For example, the Chinese side, okay, let's drop off probably the tariffs on the Chinese EVs. If you want to the Chinese side to share the technology with you, I guess there's a way to do it.
Yeah,
That's, you invite the Chinese companies to invest in European countries. And then, that's why there are reports, they ask the Chinese side to share technology with them through investment in the European countries, access to the
yeah,
market at a price.
yeah,
But that's I guess, we can find a middle way to solve the problem instead
absolutely.
of having this zero sum approach. So they need to talk to each other and find a way acceptable to both sides.
So you mentioned de-risking, and this is something that we talked about yesterday also, this growing talk about de-risking and reshoring and all of that. So do you think that in pragmatic terms, not just political rhetoric, do you think in practical terms, can the US and EU actually reduce their dependence on China?
I would say to a certain degree, maybe, but a small degree.
Hmm.
If we change that term into decoupling, most of the people would
Yes.
say that's impossible. Because the Chinese export, if you take a look at that in 2024, I believe it grew, from previous years.
Yeah.
Actually, U.S. purchased more
Yeah.
from the Chinese side because China is a strong manufacturing power. It
Absolutely.
manufactures high quality products with a very competitive at a very competitive price. So
Hmm.
consumers love it, and you cannot stop consumers from purchasing high quality EV, for example,
Yeah.
with a very competitive price tag.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that's, some people like in the US, they have this fear that, if the US continue to, say, shut the door,
Hmm.
shut the Chinese EVs out of their market, but
Yeah.
ultimately they will lose because, if you want to develop EV, frankly speaking, today, you
Hmm.
have to work with
Come
the
to
Chinese
China.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah, come to China. This is a part of the global supply chain. You
Yeah.
cannot do it by yourself right
Hmm.
now because the technologies are, very much in the hands of the Chinese companies.
Yeah.
So you have to work with them to learn and to share
Yeah.
and to develop. That's the approach, the right approach. That's the way to go. Otherwise, there's a risk of being left behind.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and of course, Trump and his people, they don't really believe in climate change. They're still talking about the drill, baby drill, right?
Hmm.
Um, most of the people would say, our future depends on green energy rather than, this
Absolutely.
fossil,
Yeah.
yeah, fuel.
So, now that we've mentioned about sanctions and tariffs and de-risking, so this is a very, I would say, a difficult time economically for global markets. So, particularly developing countries and countries from global south, how do you think they will, uh, sort of function in this sort of a situation, especially when their economies rely on stable trade flows with so much
Good
uncertainty going
question.
on?
Yes, this is really a challenging time for a lot of countries, for big economies like the European Union, China. Today we know the reaction from Japan,
Yeah.
because Japanese auto export to the U.S. Is like stands for more than 20% of their export. So there's a huge chunk of their trade.
Yeah.
And if the US imposes 25% of tariffs on their products, on their auto and auto parts, that's a heavy blow to the
Yeah.
Japanese economy.
Yeah.
So probably even Japan, they will resort to uh, kind of retaliatory measures against the US side.
Yeah.
So that could lead to a global trade war in which I would say the developing economies could suffer the most because of
Absolutely.
their their foundation is not that solid
Mm.
solid as the big economies. The
Yeah.
big economies, in the worst sense, they can
Yeah.
have this domestic economy, rely on themselves, but not to the smaller economies. So yes, there's this uncertainty hurts,
Mm.
and the U.S. If you take a look at the rates, either they increase the rates, raise the rates, or decrease the rates. there's always impact on the developing economies.
Yeah.
Uh, that issue for them very much a headache for some developing countries, and also they need investment from these more advanced economies
Yes. Yes.
so they can grow their economy, and also they need access to the markets
To their
in
markets.
advanced
Yeah.
economies. Yeah, to the U.S. market, to European market, to the Chinese market, Japanese market,
Yeah.
etc. So they can export, so they can grow. I
Yeah.
mean, if we fall into this full-scale global trade war, or every country practices protectionism,
Yes.
and then the developing countries, most of them, I would say, will suffer from that kind of scenario.
Yes.
This is very, everybody will get worse
Yeah.
because the rest of the global economy, if they get worse, of course the economy get worse because you do less trade.
And I think
Less trade
also
means less
also with the
growth.
developing countries also, even if you talk about BRICS partners, so they'd be forced to pick sides then, all of us. Because if you're, for example, the BRICS partners, the countries that are aligning with China, they'd face sanctions from US and the NATO allies because that's really, anti to
Mm.
whatever they believe in. So this would just get very complicated and messy beyond trade terms.
It is. It is. Right. I'm, as I said yesterday, I don't think they will form alliance, because alliance means, you are allied against a third party, like the
Yeah.
BRICS countries. If you call them allied, means, against somebody else. No, they are very careful, to avoid that kind of impression. Because for some of the members like India, they want to be open to both the Western
Yes.
markets, Western countries, and also to
And
other
China.
developing countries,
Yeah.
China. And then so it's probably Brazil. So I think most of the countries would say, let's build let's reform this
Hmm.
global order, so in which every country can be treated equally,
Yes.
and we can probably more, let's say, freer from sanctions,
Yes.
seeing this abuse of U.S. Dominant power of dollar, for example,
Yeah.
and so they can have more chances of development,
Hmm.
economic growth, fair trade for them.
Yeah.
So this is the goal. This is, there's no like hidden agenda against the West. The goal is simply, of course, you have an advanced economy. We are the developing country. We also want to develop our economy.
Yes.
Our people also want to enjoy a better living standards. So
Hmm.
this is understandable, and they want to do it in a way to be treated in a more equal manner rather than like being dictated of doing
Exactly.
this and that.
Yeah.
So that's the case. I think yes, they will be forced. If that's the case, they will be forced to work with each other
Hmm.
probably more closely. They will try to be more creative in finding out, in which way we can work in a closer manner,
Yes.
because probably there's uncertainty in the U.S. market or in the EU market.
So I want to mention and talk about China's soft power here. So we have talked a lot about China developing other countries and forming alliances and, its internal domestic policies also. But I want to just ask here that beyond economic influence, how is China looking towards strengthening its global partnerships amid rising tensions, multipolarity, all of that?
Good question. I think you talked about soft power. The soft power means something invisible. Usually, people
Yeah.
like you. That's soft power, right?
Yeah.
People, if you do well in science and research, people admire your progress. That's
Yes.
soft power. If you have a good universities, people want to go to your country to study overseas. They want to
Yes.
further their study. They want to improve. That's attractiveness. That's soft power. And if you look at the Chinese side, of course they try to promote their culture, try to
Yeah.
promote their language. The purpose is really to increase understanding of China. China has no hidden agenda of imposing its political system on other countries,
Hmm.
or dictating other countries' development path. No, this is not the Chinese way of doing things. China, it understands that, it's some of the issues, some of the policies, the Chinese thinking people would say, oh, there's a lack of transparency. We
Mm.
just don't understand what's going on in China. What's this policy about? Why they are doing
Yeah.
things this way or not that way? So that's the Chinese response. Let's have a Confucius Institute. Help people learn the Chinese language, the culture. So
Yeah.
the thinking, the philosophy behind the policy making, right?
Yes.
And another, I would say, increasingly, what you are seeing is the Chinese attractiveness, in particular, to the developing countries, to the global South, is also the culture. For example, I'm not sure whether you are aware of this. The new movie called Noja the Second is a legendary of a boy basically, but
Okay.
he's a powerful boy. Um, this is so well made. I would say it's definitely on par with Hollywood, the best Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
But there's a strong Chinese element there.
Yes.
For Asian countries, it's easier to understand, but
Mm.
it's probably very challenging to introduce the movie to be enjoyed by someone from European countries or from the US
Yeah.
because of the differences of culture. But
And the
still, I
lack of
think it's
knowledge about the culture also, because the countries that follow a culture,
exactly
they'd be easier to understand. Yeah.
right. But it represents the level of production, the level of storytelling of the Chinese side. It
Yeah.
reached such a level that they are producing the movies to be on the best category, the highest category in terms of quality.
Yes.
So that's very attractive. And if you look at the technology, Chinese EVs, solar panels, batteries, or Chinese, DeepSeek,
Yeah.
etc. So yes, again, they are creating this kind of attractiveness for scientists, for people who love technology, who follow technology. They would look up to the Chinese side. Oh, what China is doing?
Yeah.
What's the Chinese progress? So that's attractive. That's a soft power. I think in that side, China is very attractive to the global South. If you
Yeah.
look at the AI technology,
It
it's
is.
open
It is.
source.
Indeed.
It's,
Yeah.
everybody can use it.
Yeah.
It's open. It's not restrictive, unlike ChatGPT,
Yeah.
US AI technologies.
Yeah.
So China, interestingly, if you pay close attention to their practice, China has this idea is basically, we are ready to share in terms of technology, in particularly with developing countries.
Yeah.
So if you think this technology is useful to you, you can make a good use of this technology.
Mm.
Basically, they are ready to share, through the Chinese companies, whether state-owned or the private,
Yeah.
if they are investing in certain countries.
So my questions end here, and we are left with only 5 minutes in the meeting. So
But we do need to talk to each other.
yeah.
And this sense of fear, concern, and uncertainty. For example, some of the immigrants, living in the U.S. now, we see, for people who visit the U.S., they are advised, oh, to buy a new phone, don't to contain anything that's critical of the U.S. This is really bad. I feel
Yeah.
sad about that.
Yes.
We talk about the freedom of speech. A private person, a private capacity, whatever they say, it's
Yeah.
individual. It's okay, right? It's okay. But when you see the barriers being built across national borders, it's really a sad thing, especially
Yeah.
for young people.
Hmm.
We need to talk to each other to experience the culture of another country, experience the system of another country. I've been to different countries. I see when I arrive in that country, or I have the attitudes of learning
Yes.
from the country, right?
Yes.
Is there anything we can learn from? What about their culture? How do they do things in their own way? You see the differences,
Yes.
and some part you appreciate, some part probably you are not used to it, but
Hmm.
that's okay.
Hmm.
We are supposed to be different, but at the same time we are the same
Yes.
human being.
Human beings.
We
Yes.
love our family members, we have loved ones, we take care of our kids, family, children. We love. We have colleagues, we have good friends. It's the same. We work hard. We try to have a good living. It's
Hmm.
the same everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think we have much more in common than differences,
Yes. I
and we
agree with
should
you on that.
appreciate
Absolutely agree.
and cherish our have this, common ground here.
I absolutely agree with you. So thank you so much. I've had another very lovely
Thank you,
conversation with
Rami.
you, and I shall
Okay,
touch base with you very soon. As soon as it gets issued, I shall be sending you the link as well as the link to the Prime magazine as well as the YouTube video as well.
great, great.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
I'm
much,
looking
and
forward to it.
yeah, me too,
All
me
right.
too. Thank you so much. You have a good evening.
Thank you, Rami.
Thank you,
You have a
thank
good
you.
day.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.